Well, this one is really cool for me. I'm sitting here in Warsaw, Virginia. Did I say that right?
Yeah, good old Warsaw, Virginia.
Yeah.
The metropolis that is.
Yeah, I must have missed that the way that we drove in. it was something. But I'm sitting here with Marcus Sheridan. He's the author of more than two books, but the two that I have here on the table. And we are in the warehouse of River Pools.
In Virginia.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you got kind of, when you were starting out your manufacturing facility and whatnot, that was here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
So we're just going to sit down here and have an honest and real conversation and hopefully learn something. So, Marcus, before we get started, I think it's really important to talk about, I just read this book here, They Ask You Answer, which you wrote. How long ago did you write this?
First one came out in 2017, and the second edition came out in 2020.
Okay. And this one just launched here recently.
Yeah.
I want to say just
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's called Endless Customers.
Yeah.
So I love it right here on the back. It says simplicity and structure. Like, that's really what it should be about.
That's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
It's like when we were talking about walking up to the line, how lines matter, right? It's like I talk to thousands of business owners. Most are very confused about a multiplicity of things, but more often than not, it's like, where do I start? Where do I go?
Yeah.
So where do I start? Where do I go? Endless Customers, it very much shows you from a sales and marketing perspective. If you want to become the most known and trusted brand in your space, where do you start? Where do you go?
I like that. I actually want that myself. I want to do what it says here right on the cover of the book: build trust, drive sales, and become the market leader.
Yeah.
Because I want to impact my industry for good.
That's right.
That's really why I want to do it. And I just recently heard a gentleman sharing. He was speaking somewhere, and he goes, "Hey, we're making money." But not necessarily just for us. We're making money for the people around us. You were talking to me here about hard times earlier and just how, I hope this is okay to say it, but I have the microphone, but like how you had to go without paychecks for a few weeks sometimes to take care of the other people that were here, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's something that's very different about a real and true entrepreneur. I think an entrepreneur is the person, you have a businessman who is a CEO. An entrepreneur is someone who, when you're laying in bed at night and you look over at your significant other, you're like, hey, we might not be able to get paid for a few weeks so that we can take care of these people.
Oh, yeah.
That's what an entrepreneur really is.
Yeah. You know that phrase, hard times create strong men and women, and they also create potentially strong businesses, or they kill the business.
Yeah.
It depends. Our story is an interesting one. I'll talk about it if that's okay with you. I was working in the D.C. area right after college. This was circa 2001. Didn't like it very much. I was already married. My wife didn't like it. So we decided to come back home to where we are right now, which is called the Northern Neck of Virginia. My two buddies had just started a pool company called River Pools here in Warsaw, Virginia. Not in this location, but they were trying to install pools like above ground and in-ground pools out in the field. And they said to me, Marcus, would you be willing to run our retail store while we are installing these pools? And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, this is obviously, it's not what I want to do with my life, but I'm willing to play.
Yeah.
And a couple months in, they said, hey, Marcus, would you be willing to be a partner? And never did I dream that I would become a pool guy. And I became a pool guy. And I got so many interesting stories around just how that all happened, how it all went down. Can I tell a couple of them that are interesting? We were selling hot tubs out of our retail store. I had been in the company for a couple of weeks and didn't really know much about hot tubs at the time. Somebody walks in who has clearly owned a hot tub before and is looking at buying his second hot tub. And so he starts asking me questions about hot tubs, and I didn't really have good answers. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And what was so great about this guy is he didn't let off. He proceeded to bludgeon me with questions for the next 10 to 15 minutes, to the point where he eventually says to me, well, if you can't answer any of my questions, why do you work here?
Wow.
And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good kick in the teeth.
Yeah.
I needed that one. And I really think that was the catalyst moment where it's, in many ways, it's the reason why I'm here today. Because after that day, I became obsessed with learning about the pool and spa industry. I spent all my time, even at like when I was home, studying about the different manufacturers and the different brands. And what would happen is, in the coming days and weeks, my business partners, well, they were my bosses at the time, they would walk into the store after they had been working out in the field, and I'd say, I want you to ask me any question you can think of about a hot tub, I want you to ask me. And they're like, okay, and they'd ask me a question, and I would just start just like laying out all these different like facts, and like, how do you know all this stuff? Because I have been doing my research. And so the point is getting hit in the face like that by a customer was everything that I needed to transform me into becoming really what was a subject matter expert. And that led to me becoming a business partner, which is just pretty wild how that works. But that's, that's exactly, that's exactly how it went down. There's always like little moments like that where it, like, I had no intention to do this, but I did it. And then we were in the battle, and we were in the battle for years. And we went through some really, really hard times because in 2003, because none of us were particularly good with accounting, we went through an embezzlement. If you're listening to this right now, you probably yourself or somebody you know has gone through an embezzlement, especially happens in the trades all the time, right? Because a lot of us get in the game because we're pretty good at the trade, but we're not necessarily very good at the number side of it, right? And that was me. That was my business partners. We didn't have somebody to fill that void. Well, we hired a bookkeeper. We gave her check writing authority so she could sign. We totally trusted her. Nobody worked harder than she did. Right. Make a long story short, she tried to rob us to the point where she burned the company to the ground. Wow. And so she would file taxes every week, but would not actually pay the taxes. Oh. So within a year and a half of her working at the company, we owed the IRS a couple $100,000, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars.
They get kind of funny about that.
Oh, and they have no mercy when it comes to embezzlement. They don't care that somebody stole from you because they see it as your fault, and they almost see it like you stole it.
Yeah, from them.
Yeah, from them. And so I remember when they came into our retail location and they literally they said, we're putting liens on all of your homes. And that was tough for my wife, right? Yeah. Because she felt like in the years that followed, that until we were able to get rid of that she didn't know, own nothing.
No certainty.
And at least my wife, and I think, like great women, moms in general, they want a nest. They want a place that they can call home. And she never felt like it was hers. And so it was a really stressful time. That lady ended up going to jail, but it set us back. And in a time period in 2005, 6, 7, where all these trades companies were prospering, especially in pools, because if you could breathe, you could get a loan for a pool at the time because of the bubble.
If you could breathe, I love it.
Yeah. And then 2008 comes around. Suddenly, you have Lehman Brothers. You've got the crash. I go into that year thinking, man, we're finally like getting past this IRS stuff. We're going to be successful. And then, bam, we have the crash. And within 48 hours of the crash, we lost $250,000 in business. People that said, hey, we want to put down a deposit for a pool, they withdrew that deposit. And then in the coming weeks and months, it got worse and worse. And by January of 2009, it looks like definitively we're going out of business. Yeah. And it had been almost 10 years of straight turmoil, like punched in the face over and over again. And I just thought, like, how can we survive? The thing is we didn't have a plan B. Right? And we were going to lose our homes if we filed bankruptcy. But the glory of pain and suffering is it forces us outside of our comfort zone. Right? That's right. And all of a sudden we say, okay, we got nothing to lose here, so let's send it. Yeah. And that's when we really started to send it, because that's when I started to learn. Like, I just had this inclination that I, as a buyer, 2009, I was changing. I knew our buyers were changing. I was using the internet way more. So I started to learn about the internet and these fancy phrases that you and I today might call inbound marketing, content marketing, social media, blogging, stuff like that. And what I heard, my simple pool guy mind was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions, worries, issues, and concerns, and you're willing to address them online, especially on your website, through text, through video, you just might save your business. So I went to my 2 business partners and I said, we're going to become like the Wikipedia of pools. We are just going to take all the questions anybody's ever asked and we're going to address them online. And I just felt like this was going to save the business. Well, to make a long story short, I brainstormed every single question I had ever received as being a pool sales guy at the time. I had hundreds of questions, and we addressed those online on our website, through text, through video in the coming years. And within 2 years, we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And
In the world,
and it completely revolutionized the business. We were talking about things, Joshua, and doing things that nobody had ever done in our space. That strategy became known as they ask, you answer. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, and it's been a crazy ride. I'm sharing like 1% of it. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Well, I mean, I think it's really cool. We talked a little bit earlier about one of the big things that you did through that time was you became your own manufacturer.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing to separate you. And you were explaining that to me in the form of being a car dealer and like, well, how would it change the game if you were now manufacturing your product and your car? And it's like that disruption, what you did when you say you were talking about things that were so out there.
Yeah.
That I'm assuming that's one of the things that came out of that.
Yeah. That did come out of it. We built such an extraordinary brand here in the U.S. that I was getting leads from all over the country, but I couldn't service them. I was in Virginia. I was a little Virginia pool company. Couldn't serve all these, these folks around the country. So I said, there's got to be like something that we can do. So it wasn't until about 2017 that we started manufacturing and it started to take off. And by 2019, we were building about 1,000 pools a year out of this very rough, if you will, building. I mean, this is like as rustic as it gets. And I learned that you didn't have to have necessarily like fancy stuff in order to have an incredible business. And I think anybody that's been in manufacturing learns that over the course of time, right? It's just you can make it work. You don't have to have all the newest things and the latest and greatest this and that in order to be very, very successful. And so, yeah, that took off, but we disrupted a lot of ways. In fact, in Endless Customers, the book, I teach for the first time very specific ways to disrupt your industry. Can I share a couple now? Because
please.
I think they're really, really interesting. Yeah. Well, let me give you an example of the way things work for us early on. When we started with fiberglass pools, you see behind me right now, we've got all these like fiberglass pool shells, right?
Yeah.
So when we started the business in 2001, the way that you installed a fiberglass pool shell was you dug a hole in the ground, you put a sand base in that hole. You put the pool shell on top of that sand base. You backfilled around that pool with sand, and then you poured your concrete patio around that. Now think about it. There's a book 2,000 years ago that said, "Do not build your house on sand." And in the year 2000, we're building pools on sand? What the heck? And
Come on.
Fiberglass pools were having issues of settling, and sand just moves, especially if it liquefies. And so we said, this is dumb. And we very openly talked about the fact that instead of sand, you should choose crushed stone or some type of stone that doesn't have that settling issue. At the time, 80% of all fiberglass pools were built on sand in the year 2001, roughly.
That's a big number.
It was a big number. And today, because we made such a fuss about it, more than 80% of fiberglass pools are built on crushed stone. That's how you can change an industry.
Wow.
Yeah.
That totally flipped.
Yeah. Let me tell you a couple other just like things that we did were way outside the box. And of course, I talk about these, but which by the way, the lesson from that is this. What's happening in your industry right now that drives you crazy, that you know is inferior, that you know shouldn't be done, yet it's being done by a lot of, let's say, the contractors in your space. If you're seeing it, and you're like, that's wrong, talk about it. If it makes you upset, talk about it. And then all of a sudden, all boats rise because now the industry will get better because of it.
Yeah.
All right. So that was an example of it. Let me give you another, I was just doing crazy stuff.
I love it. This is great.
One time I was in a grocery store, and I was looking at the magazine aisle. This was probably circa like 2011, 2012. And I saw the Motor Trend Car of the Year magazine. You remember that magazine,
Yeah.
Motor Trend Car of the Year?
Yeah.
So I'm like,
I'm old enough to remember magazines.
Motor Trend Car of the Year. I bet you we could have swimming pool awards of the year for fiberglass pools. Nobody's ever done it. Why couldn't I do it? So I'm probably like at the time, I think I'm like 33, 34 years old. I said, okay, so here's what I want to do. I'm going to look at all these manufacturers, because we were just a dealer for a manufacturer at the time. So I'm going to look at all these manufacturers. I'm going to look at all their shapes and sizes, and I'm going to give out awards, publish them online, for best pools in class for the year.
Come on.
Best kidney-shaped pool, best rectangle pool, best diving pool, best freeform pool, best family pool, okay? And I was just going down the list, and I was giving out these awards to literally manufacturers I was selling against. So I was like a Chevy dealer giving out an award to Ford Corporate or to, Toyota or to any of these big brands.
Yeah.
Now, here's what happened. First, people were like, what's this kid doing? Like, these manufacturers. But the content was getting picked up.
Yeah,
People were
paying
just
attention.
like paying attention like it had never been done before. And so then suddenly I would have these manufacturers reach out to me, and they were like, Marcus, we've got a pool that we think would be great for your awards next year. We'd love to fly you out so you could check it out. You think about that for a second. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
that's hilarious. Then I started seeing manufacturers were announcing on the homepage of their website that they had won an award for best pool in class. And everybody thought, it was like, this is so crazy. But by the time I was 33 or 34, because of this content that I was producing, we not only were the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, but I was viewed in the world of fiberglass pools as probably the foremost expert of pools in the world, of fiberglass pools. Here's what's crazy. I really didn't know squat compared to, let's say, my business partner, Jason, who really is one of the foremost experts today.
Yeah.
But the thing that I could do is I could listen to Jason. I could articulate the things that he was thinking, and he did some of these himself. He did videos and articles. But I could take what my team was saying, and I could put it out there and say it in a way that the world could understand it.
Yeah.
I one time got a message from this lady in the Virgin Islands, and she says, Marcus, everything I've learned about fiberglass pools, I've learned from you. I don't really trust my contractor. Could I fly you out to the Virgin Islands and have you oversee the project, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want this lady to know that I can't even turn on an excavator. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, I wasn't that guy. I couldn't shoot a grade.
Yeah.
But what I could do is I could explain things in ways that homeowners could understand them, which builds trust, which of course is the business we're all in. And that's the like why for all of this stuff is trust is the fundamental currency for business. It's never going away. It's going to be critical to you 5, 10, 20 years. What's not? Probably Google, probably Google Ads, probably Facebook. They're all going away. What's not going away is the need for you to become the most known and trusted brand in your market. Period. You've got to become that. How do you do that? Well, you can't be like everyone else, Joshua. You got to be willing to break some dang rules. In the history of the world, we see it over and over again. The rule breakers become the rule makers, and the previous leader becomes the rule follower. And why? Because they were too afraid to replace their previous business model. This is why potentially Google is screwed. If you look at the history of the way the internet has worked, right? We started when the big behemoth in the room at first was Yahoo. Now, a lot of people don't realize this. Yahoo was the big thing.
Yeah.
Google came around and completely disrupted them. What's wild, though, is Google's results were not better than Yahoo's, but they did something extraordinary from a design perspective. You see, if you go to Yahoo today, they're making the same stupid mistake that they made 25 years ago, which is...
Come on.
You see a whole bunch of stuff not just one little rectangular box.
Yeah.
So you see today's news, and you see today's weather, and you see some stupid games, and you see all the stuff, and they have a little search box too that you can use if you want. Google said, how about we just give them exactly what they want without distraction? And so they created a page that had nothing but a box, and suddenly Google became the preferred choice.
Absolutely.
So it was the greatest design mistake in the history of the world, financially speaking.
Yeah.
And to this day, Yahoo is not smart enough to have made a change, which is extraordinary. Now, here's what's really wild, though. Google found a way to make money through paid, right? Today, though...
I just want to make it clear to Yahoo's lawyers that we do not support or condone anything Marcus might say today.
Yeah, but I support and condone everything I say. And I would tell you this, that if you do a search today for best XYZ contractor on Google, and then you go to ChatGPT, and you search best XYZ contractor, such and such place, here's what's wild. With Google, you're going to see a bunch of sponsored ads. You're probably going to see some related questions. You might see an AI summary, you might not, but you see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is going to give you a straight answer. Now, what's wild is Google could do that right now. They could give you a straight answer, but what are they protecting? A previous business model.
That's right.
And whenever you try to protect previous business models,
come on, here it is. Listen.
It does not go well for you in the end.
Yeah.
So you cannot be married to the past as a business, as a brand. You have to constantly be looking forward. Look, I wrote They Ask You Answer. As soon as I wrote They Ask You Answer, people were like, oh, Marcus. Well, as soon as I wrote it, and then in 2022, when ChatGPT comes out at the end of that year, people are like, what's this mean for They Ask You Answer? What's this mean for like online search? What's this mean for Google? And I was like one of the first dudes to say, listen, let me tell you right now that Google is going to die.
Yeah.
And you better be prepared for it, which is why you have to build a known and trusted brand. Because if your house is built on Google, that house will fall.
Come on.
Because that is a platform that will come and go. I don't know when it's going to fall, but I can tell you this. Everybody that's listening to this right now that has ever used ChatGPT is starting to use ChatGPT more than they're using Google. True or false for you, Joshua?
It's true. It's true.
Like, this is where everybody's headed. Now, even if you are a business owner and you're like, listen, man, I didn't start this to become a technology guy. Well, you signed up to meet the buyer where the buyer is.
Yeah.
The moment you said, I want to exchange money for a good or a service, I want to take people's money. You said, I now am going to meet the buyer where the buyer is. That's what you sign up for it as an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is meant to meet the buyer where the buyer is. You can't say, well, I just don't like video. I don't think I'm going to do video. Video's not my thing. Nobody has ever come to your website before, ever, and really wanted to see a video and then said, they don't have any video. I really wanted to see the video. But you know what? I bet they're really just nervous on camera, so I'm going to give them a pass. Never, ever has happened. What do they say? I can't get what I want. I can't see the thing that I want. I can't learn the thing that I want. That's the essence of what entrepreneurship is about. Look around, say, how's the world changing? And then lean into it. I don't resist the changes. I learned a long time ago that oftentimes really, really important decisions in business can be screwed up by personal opinions.
Ooh.
And so instead of allowing your personal opinions to screw up really smart business decisions, you should say, okay, my opinions don't really matter. What is the marketplace doing? Where are they going? Where are they found? What do they want? Just like they want everything faster. They want everything more friction-free. They want to eliminate the fear. Like, this is what they want. Can you give it to them? You don't have to innovate a new widget in order to become very innovative. Oftentimes, you just change your sales and marketing strategy. If you're willing to talk about things, and I mentioned this in Endless Customers, basically four pillars of a known and trusted brand. I will share each one quickly.
Yeah.
Okay? Number one pillar of a known and trusted brand. You got to be willing to say online what others aren't willing to say. A lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But then when I say, yeah, but what are you talking about online right now that the majority of your competitors are not talking about? And they're like, yeah, I guess I'm not really doing that. I've already just mentioned a couple really basic ones, right?
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one in a second. Number two, you got to be willing to show with video what others in your space aren't willing to show. All right, we'll come back to that one because I got a good story about that one. Number three, you got to be willing to sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. We'll come back to that one too.
We're going to come back to all of them.
And then finally, number four, you got to be more human than others are willing to be. So you got to be willing to say what others aren't willing to say, show what others aren't willing to show, sell in a way others aren't willing to sell, and be more human than others are willing to be. Those are the 4 pillars of a known and trusted brand today. That's what makes up the endless customer system. And if I was meeting with anybody that's listening to this right now, and if I said to them, can you honestly say that you're talking about showing, selling, and being more human than 95% of your competitors and you're doing consistently, most would say, honestly, no, Marcus, I'm not.
Yeah.
That's a problem. If you want to become that known and trusted brand, that's a problem. And some of these people are spending a butt ton on Google Ads each month. And I'm telling you, that is not a very smart. Every single company I've talked to this year that is doing Google Ads has told me we're spending more and we're getting less.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to change. You want to talk about the 4 pillars? Because I'm hyped about those.
Please do.
All right. So let's look at pillar number 1.
Actually, I wanted to ask you one question, but I'm going to change it right now. Could you tell me about the 4 pillars? There we go. That's my question.
There we go. Sorry, because I'm like one of those guys that'll just, as soon as I am able to run, I just want to run. But I want you to stop me at any point, Joshua, of course. All right, number 1 pillar, say what others aren't willing to say. We talk about this in They Ask You Answer, and we talk about endless customers. And that is, there's 5 subjects that buyers constantly research, you, me, everybody's listening to this right now, that we have learned through this thing called the School of Search to always do. Nobody taught us, but this is what we've learned. 5 subjects that you want to know before you buy a thing, before you reach out to the company. What are the 5? Here's what you want to know. As buyers and consumers, we want to know how much is it. We want to understand cost, pricing, etc. So that's number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, we want to understand problems/objections. In other words, we want to understand how could this blow up in my face? What could go wrong? You see, when we get serious about buying something, we also want to figure out, okay, so what are the issues that I could be confronted with here? Number 3, we're obsessed with comparisons. We love to compare stuff online. Think about how many times you've compared something online. Number 4, reviews. The thing about reviews, everybody loves reviews. But you don't just want the good reviews. You want the good, the bad, and the ugly reviews. All right? Because if somebody doesn't have any negative reviews, it actually induces seeds of doubt. And then finally, number 5, best. Best, most, top. Think about how many times you've gone online and searched best plus another phrase. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best. Those are the big 5. And if I was talking to anybody that's listening to this right now, Joshua, and I said to you, what percentage of the content you have online is related to those 5 things? They'd say, not very much. Not very much. And then they would say, but you don't understand, Marcus, we're different. And I would tell you, sorry, sir or ma'am, you are not different because your buyers are rooted in the same psychology my buyers are. So let's just look at cost for a second. Why do so many people push back on cost? What's funny about this is if you went online right now, or if I asked you, have you researched how much something costs online? You'd say, well, yes, of course. And if I said to you, if you're on a website and you're looking for cost and price information and you can't find it, what's the emotion you experience? You'd say super frustrated, right?
Yeah.
So what gives you the right to feel frustrated? Well, you're the buyer, you're the consumer, and you're trying to make a decision, but they're making it very hard on you. So in this moment of frustration, do you as the buyer, do you as the searcher, do you say to yourself, well, I'll just keep on looking on this website until I find it? No, that's ridiculous. We know the average person will spend less than 10 seconds on a website looking for cost and price information until they leave. So the second reason why we're the other component to this is if I said to you, well, if you can't find it online, do you say, well, of course they're not talking about cost and price. They're a value-based business. I'm going to call them on the phone. Who does that? We don't like to call on the phone until we feel we're ready. Until we feel like we are informed and comfortable enough to say, I'm not going to make a mistake. And so this is the wild thing about it. We don't like to talk about this as businesses, and there's 3 major reasons why we don't like to talk about this as businesses, yet buyers want to know it so much. I'll tell you the 3 right now. First major reason, and this is what everybody's saying right now that's listening to this, that's shaking their head, they're saying, oh, this pool guy doesn't understand my business. What they're saying is, Well, every job is different, and it depends. Okay, so let's say that's true, which it is, especially in the world of trades. Could you explain what drives the cost of your product or service up? Yes. Could you explain what drives the cost of your product or service down? Yes. Could you explain why some companies are more expensive? Yes. Could you explain why some companies are less expensive? Yes. Could you help me understand why, if you gave me a quote and some companies are really expensive, some are less expensive, why there's such a delta? Yes. Could you give me a rough sense of your pricing? Yes. You see, the whole "it depends" is the easiest one to explain, but here's the thing. If you do not explain why pricing depends in your industry, why it's variable, what happens is the person doesn't understand the factors that drive cost. And you know what that leads to, Joshua?
Come on.
I'll tell you, a lack of education. And a lack of education means that they're going to choose the lowest price thing. Why? Because they're ignorant. That's called commoditization. What commoditizes an industry? Commoditization is caused by a lack of education from these very same tradespeople that are saying, but I can't talk about the thing because every job is different. So that's the first reason why we can't talk about cost and price.
Come on.
Or that's the ridiculous reason. Second reason we say we can't do it is because, well, if they see we're more expensive, then we just might scare them away. Not true. Because the thing that scares us away online isn't when somebody is willing to talk about cost and price, but rather when they're not. What's more scary to you? A menu that has pricing on it or a menu that has no pricing on it at all?
Yeah, hands down, the menu. Like you ever go to a restaurant?
Market price.
Yeah. Yes.
When it says market price, what do? I tell you what, you don't even ask because you're too embarrassed to ask. Do you know how many people don't make a phone call to a business because they don't want to be embarrassed to have to say, yeah, we can't afford that?
Yeah.
Third major reason why companies don't talk about cost and price is they say, well, I don't want my competitors to see it, which is really ridiculous because if I talk to most people that are listening to this right now and I said, do you have a pretty good sense of what your competitors charge? You'd say yes. So if you have a good sense of what they charge, they've got a good sense of what you charge. It's a big secret, non-secret. Everybody acts like nobody knows what everybody's charging, when in reality, everybody's got a pretty good sense as to what everybody else is charging. Now, the sad thing is I'm talking about this right now, Joshua, and there's still listeners that are saying, but you don't get it. I do get it because I've now worked with literally thousands of companies on this very subject for roughly 15 years. We were the first company in the world that talked about cost and price for fiberglass pools online. We talked about what drives cost up, what drives cost down, why some companies are expensive, why some companies are cheap, roughly where ours fall. I wrote an article that took me 45 minutes in 2009 to write, okay? 45 minutes. That article got so much traction and ultimately so many leads, and we can track the total number of leads that came from it.
That's huge.
To this day, I know that one single article for River Pools of Virginia has generated over $35 million in sales.
Wow.
$35 million in sales we would not have had we not been willing to address a simple question, which is how much does it cost? But we didn't even say exactly how much does it cost. You see what I'm saying? And so when I say you got to be willing to say what others aren't willing to say, that's what we're talking about. That's the big five. It is the essence of becoming that trusted voice, leaning into what others are so dang afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ready for second pillar?
Let's go.
Second pillar, show what others.
Thank you for letting me say 3 words there. I appreciate that.
You got it, brother. I'm here for you, Joshua. So second pillar, and it really has a lot to do with this building right here because it all happened here.
Come on.
When we started manufacturing fiberglass pools, quickly realized something. No manufacturer had ever showed exactly how they make their fiberglass pools. So we decided to create a series of videos. We created 8 videos. The average length was 10 minutes long. So literally 80 minutes of video showing you our entire manufacturing process. I mean, if you wanted to start a fiberglass pool manufacturing company, Joshua, you could have done it by watching these videos. Suddenly manufacturers were calling me like, dude, why are you showing this? You're like showing your secret sauce here. I'm like, secret sauce? There's no secret. This is Thousand Island dressing and everybody knows it. There's no secret sauce. And so here's what's wild, is people started to call us up and they would say, you're the only one that's willing to show. And we started picking up dealers all over the country because the dealer would call us up and say, I got a homeowner here that wants to buy a pool. The problem is they're telling me they're not going to buy anything but a river pool. So how do I become a dealer? You see, we've built this extraordinary business. We didn't have regional sales reps. Wow. Most manufacturers have reps. We had 0 reps because who's the best rep? Homeowner, end user in this case. Because if they're demanding it, and if they're telling the pool builder in this context, hey, I love you, buddy, but I'm not going to do business with you unless you have a river pool, game changer. And so really, what are you showing? We constantly make claims online. It's like it's our people that make us different. All right, with video, how much are you really showing your people? Because if you're not really showing them, they're no different, man. I know you think your people are different, but what makes somebody truly different is everybody else understanding their story. So what are you showing that others are not? So that's an example of the second pillar. Third pillar, this one gets me really stoked, and that is sell in a way others aren't willing to sell.
I have to interrupt you. It gets you really stoked. What have you been for the past 30 minutes? Like, seriously. All right, this one gets you really stoked. The third pillar.
The third pillar of a known and trusted brand, and I talk about this a lot in Endless Customers. This was one of the big additions from the Ask You Answer because it's a recent development. Gartner recently sent me a study that said 75% of all buyers today would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. 75% of all buyers would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. So what does this mean? It doesn't mean we hate salespeople. It just means that we don't want to talk to a salesperson until we're ready, until we're confident, until we're comfortable, until we feel like this person's not going to screw me over. And so how do you take advantage of the trend? Because as a business owner, you always have choices. You can complain about the trend and you can say, boy, I really wish it was like it used to be. Or you can lean into the trend and you can say, all right, there's an opportunity here. I just got to find it.
There it is.
The big opportunity is what's called self-service, or what I call self-service. Self-service is when you offer interactive experiences online, especially through your website, through tools that allow someone to get an answer that previously they would have to have gotten by talking to a human first. So in the book, we talk about 5 different types of self-service tools. I'm just going to mention a couple to you really quickly, all right? One is called self-selection. This is when the tool essentially allows you to select between choices or gives you a recommendation. So for example, if you went to the River Pools website right now, I know one of the questions that a lot of people have when they're thinking about a pool is, all right, should I get concrete? Should I get vinyl? Should I get a fiberglass pool? Well, we only sell fiberglass. I don't want my salesperson to walk into a home and the prospect has no clue as to whether or not they want fiberglass or concrete or vinyl. I want them to already know that, right, Joshua? So here's what we do. We have an interactive recommendation tool. They answer a series of questions, just like if you came to me in the street and said, yo, Marcus, be honest, man, what type of in-ground pool should I get? I'm not going to just say fiberglass because that would be completely self-serving and that would be very hollow. Whereas I might say to you, all right, so tell me about the activities you want to do in the pool and tell me how many people on average are going to be using the pool. And tell me how important, like low maintenance is to you. Like stuff like that. I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. Those questions are found in that tool. And at the end of that tool, it recommends a specific type of swimming pool. Now here is, again, what's crazy. That tool every single day recommends to people that they buy a concrete pool, that they buy a vinyl pool, that they don't buy fiberglass. How many brands do you know that literally on their own website say, you know what, don't buy from us. You should buy this instead. We're so explicit and so honest. Yeah. This is the thing that makes us the trusted advisor. You feel me here?
Yeah.
So this is powerful. Now, another example, self-scheduling tools. Scheduling is one of those things where lots of times it takes time that you shouldn't necessarily be spending. What we have found is if you just allow them to schedule time with a salesperson, that's good. But here's where it gets really interesting. And maybe not a lot of your listeners have a bunch of salespeople, but if you got a bunch of salespeople on your team, what I'm about to tell you is freaking rad, and this is crazy. I've tested it now in a bunch of markets, and that's this. If you got a scheduling tool that allows someone, instead of filling out a form and getting a call back and they get told when to meet with someone, instead they can schedule time with a salesperson, and here's the catch, Joshua. You give them a menu of the different salespeople that you have on your team. You show their face.
Oh.
You show their bio. Maybe you show an intro video about the person. Here's what we found every time. This is what's wild.
Wow.
Closing rates double. So in other words, if they're assigned a salesperson versus if they choose a salesperson, closing rates double. But once you think about it, you're like, that's actually not surprising.
Yeah.
As soon as you think about it, because every buyer wants one thing. They want to be in control. They want to feel like They're dictating the terms.
Why do, as entrepreneurs and business owners, why do we struggle so much with thinking about that?
It's because we aren't thinking like the buyer. We're so obsessed with our own sales process. We say, but that wouldn't fit with how we currently do it. I'm like, okay, so you're saying you want to keep it like it is and not double your closing rates? I don't understand. Like, in me, I like run in the direction of improvement and progression. And that's clear progress, man. That's clear progress. Another type of self-service tool, and this is the big one. And this is, when it comes to home services, especially in the trades, this is going to be table stakes in the coming years. And these are self-pricing tools. Self-pricing tools. So how does a self-pricing tool work? Well, the first question anybody has when they start the buyer's journey, somebody says, I need new windows. I need to hire an electrician. You know, I need some fill dirt in my yard. Whatever it is. First question, roughly, what's this going to cost me? You see, everybody wants to get a sense. That's the gateway. That's the entry point. That question. If they can't get that question answered, oftentimes they don't move through that initial gateway barrier because they're like, I don't know if I'm in or out. But as soon as they understand roughly this is how much it is, then they can progress. Then they can start to research companies. Then they will fill out the form. Then they will make the call, whatever the thing is.
So you've eliminated all the friction.
Oh, yeah.
So that
which leads to just a mountain of trust, something that most of your competitors don't want to do because they're busy saying there's no way we could do that. And so River Pools was the first fiberglass pool manufacturer in the world that had a build and price your pool tool. So how it works is you go to the River Pool site, you say, I want to build and price my pool. They get to choose the shape that they want. They get to choose the options and the features that they want. The tool really educates them as they go. And what's so crazy about this is at the end, it gives them a price range. Now, it's not an exact range, but it might say, based on everything you just selected, it appears that your pool is going to be somewhere in the ballpark range of $105,000 to $150,000. Now, somebody might say, well, that's a really big range. Yeah, but that's way more than they're going to get from everybody else. That allows them to say, I'm in the game or I'm not in the game. Knowing that this was such a big deal and seeing how it impacts home services, because consistently we know that if you add an estimator tool to your homepage of your website, where you say to the person, get an instant estimate. That's the call to action.
Yeah.
Get instant estimate. Every time we put this on a home improvement, home services, trade website, we see a 300 to 500% lift in leads. The second it goes up.
Wow.
So I started last year a software company called Price Guide. And Price Guide is the internet's first AI-powered pricing estimator tool. What it allows you to do as someone that's in the trades is to quickly and easily build a pricing estimator. It specializes in home services. And so basically the tool will say to you, so what industry are you in? You might say, I'm in landscaping. And then it's like, okay, if you're in landscaping, the AI will say, here's most of the services that are in landscaping. Which one of these services do you want to offer on your estimator? And they can check the boxes. And then the AI said, well, okay, based on that, here's the questions that you probably need to ask in order to give someone an estimate. You edit and modify, you put in the corresponding price ranges, and then in 30 minutes or less, you can have a working estimator. Now, here's what's crazy. I charge $200 a year for this tool. Usually you pay for the year in the first day. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating. What's crazy about software as a service is that there's churn rates, and most software, you see like this 3 to 5% monthly churn rate. We have a sub 0.6% churn rate with Price Guide. And the reason is because as soon as somebody puts it on their site, they're like, you mean to tell me I'm getting more leads than I've ever gotten? They're more qualified than they've ever been. Trust is higher than it's ever been. This is glorious. Yes, it's awesome. That's why you should have it. That's an example of selling in a way that nobody else is willing to sell. And so I will make this as a bet. I'm telling you, I will put my name on the line for this one. Within the next 5 years, 90% of all home services websites are going to have a pricing estimator of some type on their website. And if you're listening to this, you don't want to be reactive to everyone in your industry doing it.
Yeah.
So check out priceguide.ai. It's a baller, and it's incredible. The other thing I do that's pretty cool, and I'm doing this because obviously we've mentioned the golden rule a couple times.
We did, yeah.
I have on there a 2-week free trial, no credit card. You know how you have to do a trial, but you have to do a credit card?
I literally was just filling out a form, and I stopped
with the credit
filling
card.
out the form because they're asking me for the credit card.
Yeah, it pisses you off, right?
It pisses me off.
Well, we don't do that.
Wow.
That, to me, makes people say, holy freaking hallelujah, this is great. So I try to eat my own dog food. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, I believe in this stuff, man. And I look at, like, what would I like? What would I appreciate? What would I want? So that's pillar number 3, sell in ways that others aren't willing to sell. Total game changer. Any questions about
No, that's
that?
great.
And then finally, pillar 4. Pillar 4 is be more human than others are willing to be. There's different ways that you can do this, but let me just give you a couple examples of this one, Joshua.
I think I already like this one.
Yeah. How often, especially in home services, does someone have an in-home sales appointment and the homeowner is seeing the salesperson's face the first time as they're walking up the driveway?
Yeah.
That unequivocally is inexcusable, in my opinion. That is a fail of dramatic proportions, because I feel like as businesses, it's our fiduciary to make sure that this, in this case, the customer, the prospect, the homeowner, feels like they already know us, they've heard us, they have seen us before we're walking up the dang driveway or before we're meeting them in their office.
Yeah.
So how can you do that? How can you ensure that? Well, of course, you got to do more video, but an example of this is one-to-one video with email. I mentioned this a little bit in the Ask You Answer. I talk about it as well in Endless Customers. We've had this thing called electronic mail, i.e. email, for the better part now of about 28 years going strong.
Yeah.
Do you
I remember
realize?
Tom Hanks and
Yeah.
You've Got Mail.
You've got mail.
Yeah.
So we're almost 3 decades into this. People are still sending email basically the same way, text to text.
Yeah.
Come on, y'all.
Come on.
So instead, how about if somebody has, like, before that appointment and you're sending that pre-appointment email where you're letting them know, a reminder and, telling them what you're going to cover and all that, best practices stuff. Why don't you send a video and say, hey, Joshua, Marcus here. I just wanted you to see what I look like before I start walking up your driveway. I'm excited to meet you. Here's some things that we're going to cover.
I'm feeling really stupid because I didn't send you a video before we got here. So
that's all right. You have a pod and it's on video and you're getting leads all the time because people are like, I just like how that guy rolls. I like how he sounds. I like his beard.
Okay.
Man, he's got great man hair going on, right? Right? You know what I'm saying? So people see you and they're like, there's something about that guy that resonates with me. Man, I had a pod one time. Person told me the weirdest thing. It was funny. It was a woman at a conference. She said, Marcus, you were in the shower with me this morning.
Whoa.
I said, whoa, hold up. And she started laughing. She said, it's because I listen to your podcast when I'm in the shower. I had the best laugh over that. I had people, and I'm sure you've heard the same. I've had people say, you were with me on my walk up the mountain the other day.
Yeah.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
And so when you be more human than others are willing to be, you put yourself out there in a very human way. Stop hiding behind stupid Getty images or an AI image that looks like an AI image. Put your team on the photo, put them on the video, get from behind the desk and from behind the camera, get in front of the camera. You're asking people for money. Give them every reason to trust you.
Why is that so hard for us to do, Marcus?
Well, we say things like, I'm not good on camera, which is actually not true at all, right? Because if I went to anybody that's listening to this right now, and I said, are you good with people? Like when you're in the home or in the office, like when you meet with people, are you good with them? Oh, yeah, man. I mean, if I can just get in front of the customer, I'm solid. Well, then that means you're good on video. The problem is you see the video as, look, right now I'm looking at 1, 2, 3 cameras that you have set up. I don't see 3 cameras. I literally see people. I'm not kidding, man.
Yeah.
I see people. I know who's behind there.
Yeah.
I know the tradesmen and women that are behind the cameras right now. That's who I'm talking to. I know my audience.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting there thinking I'm talking to a camera. But now there's certain things, though, that you can do that make you dramatically more effective on camera. The biggest one that we teach companies, and I'm sure you've done this too because this is your game, this is your world, is what we call the no-stop rule. They have a just general rule. That is, when you start a video, you are not allowed to stop no matter what. You know, it's kind of like Jim Cantore on the Weather Channel when the hurricane comes by and he's like all of a sudden he's like falls on the ground. He's like, ah, but he keeps talking. And then in the background, somebody just walks by like, what's wrong with that guy? But that's a side note. You know what I'm talking about? You can't stop. So if I talk to anybody that's listening to this right now and I said, have you ever just stopped in the middle of a sales appointment, said, man, I really screwed that up. Can we just start from the beginning? They'd say, man, I've never done that before. So why would you do that with video? We're going to shoot this in one take.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because whatever comes out is real. I don't want to know the questions you have for me. I want it to be raw. I want it to be unfiltered. If I have to think about it, I want them to see that I'm thinking about it. If I'm passionate about it, I want them to see that I'm passionate about it. If I don't know the answer, I want them to know. If I stumble over a word, I'm totally fine with that too, because that's what people do. It makes me more human. And so you got to get past that. Besides, the other thing people say about the video thing is like, I don't want to be judged. Guess what, dude? They are judging you. They went to your website and they said, this website sucks.
Yeah.
I can't get what I want. That's called judgment.
Yeah.
So would you rather them say, man, it's so nice that I can get this? Nobody's ever said, man, it is so great that I got all the answers, but boy, is that dude ugly. They don't say that, man.
Yeah.
They're just like, I am so glad I got the answer.
Come on.
Anyway, I'm not passionate about that at all.
No, nobody got that at all. I love that. I think that passion is something for me that shows that you're real.
Yeah.
And you've lived it. You've been through this. You shared with us things that when we were talking earlier, you know, you said, well, I've never really shared this, and you shared it here on air.
Yeah, dude.
You know.
And I pretty much any question anybody asks, I would roll with. It's just one of those things for me, like, I have had people ask me before, because I speak for a living.
Yeah. It's when I first met you, was at the first Dirt World.
Yeah. 3% of the audience is like, he yelled at me. He's like, he invaded my space because I'm going to the audience. 3%. Yeah. But the other 97% is like, man, that was the most fire talk I've ever heard, man.
Yeah.
It's like, this is so, and that's because those people that I know don't resonate with me and I don't resonate with them, I've let them go before I even get on the stage, man.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I know I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
There's been people that have been listening to this pod. It's like, I don't know if I like that dude.
Yeah.
His voice is a little bit pitchy. I don't like that.
Just
he talks
slow
a little
it
bit
down
fast.
to like, 0.5 when you're listening on the podcast, and then it'll be for you.
Right. Like whatever it is. But it's like, I'm okay with that, man.
Yeah.
The moment you're okay with that, man, your life really, really changes. You become so much more effective. Then you really start to get your tribe.
Yeah.
You're just rolling like yourself. I'm rolling like myself. But the biggest reason I'm so passionate about this is because I've looked over the cliff of bankruptcy. And I was at a point in my life when I would get home at night. My wife would not say, how was your day? Because she already knew how my day was.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do, unfortunately.
My wife and I defined financial peace one way. And that was that she could go to the grocery store and not have to look at the prices.
Come on.
That's how we define financial peace.
Yeah.
You know, and there's this great phrase that says we often overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 10.
Yeah.
And my goodness, that's so true. Because for the first 10 years of my business, I never made more than $100,000 a year. I never made six figures. And then I became a multimillionaire the second 10 years. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, my wife says all the time, she's like, how did this happen? Like, where did this all come from?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know.
Well,
we were poor.
Let's talk about that, because I just was thinking about this, because I was thinking about my own life and when I started as an apprentice to be an electrician. And it's like, I wanted everything now. And I've had this revelation with experience and living life. And what I realized is you have to be okay. I think we develop these expectations of, I'm going to do this and then this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is when I do that, I'm setting myself up for failure.
That's right.
Because it's like I've labeled an expectation. So if that doesn't happen, I've said that I have failed. And I've learned this through being an apprentice and going through the trades. You just have to keep hitting it and stay consistent.
That's right.
And not give up. And then, like you said, then it just happens.
Yeah, it's that law of compounding interest, right? And you just see it in so many facets of life. It's like, man, the amount of times I thought we were knocked out of the ring.
Yeah.
But yet somehow we came back and we built something really extraordinary. And right now we're going through a really hard time. Like here in Virginia, the pool market is way down right now. We're dependent on Northern Virginia for a big portion of our customers.
Yeah.
They're dependent on the government, right? The government is being more fiscally responsible right now. But what that means is a lot of people are just like, they're not making buying decisions
Right,
that
they're just
used
waiting.
to.
Yeah.
They're just waiting. And so, hey, that's how it goes. But we've prepared for a rainy day because
Yeah.
we've built a known and trusted brand,
Yeah.
which is such a big part of this. But yeah, it doesn't happen overnight. But I can tell you this. I have been obsessed with personal development ever since I started this company. And Jim Rohn, the great mentor of my life in many ways, he would always make the famous phrase, you got to learn to work harder on yourself than you do in your job. And I think a lot of CEOs forget that. It's like you're constantly working like in the business, but you're not working on the business. But the thing that you need to be most working on really, even before all that, is yourself. You fix yourself, man, and then suddenly your business just starts to get much, much better. When I became obsessed with personal development and I was reading Good to Great and I was like every single day in my car and just like constantly just like hitting it. And I was listening to Zig Ziglar and I was listening to Tom Hopkins and it's like Jeff Gitomer.
Yeah.
It's like all these people I was listening to every day, right? I changed as a person.
Yeah.
I wasn't a good salesperson at first. I wasn't a good writer. I wasn't a good this, wasn't a good that, wasn't a good businessman. But eventually I became a lot of those things simply because of that compounding effect over time. But you're right. A lot of folks are like, man, I'm 25, man, and I just don't feel like I'm like, it's not there. It's like, come on, man, have a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
You got this thing called the law of the harvest.
Yeah.
You can't just skip straight to the harvest.
Yeah, you can't.
You got to, first of all, you got to prepare the field, and then you got to plant the seed, and then you got to nourish the crop, and then you got to protect the crop for a period of time, and then all of a sudden you have the harvest. That's been like that since the beginning of time.
Come on.
It is straight from the man himself. And so to say that you want to skip the law of the harvest, it just doesn't really work like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Marcus, when you're talking through all that, you said this a couple of times where you said you got kicked in the teeth.
Yeah.
And sometimes in business, I think as an entrepreneur, you talked about bankruptcy, you talked about embezzlement, you talked about all of these different things. And it's like, sometimes I think in business, it feels like it's just one thing after another. It's just smacking you in the face, hitting you in the teeth.
That's true.
What is it? There had to be something. What was it for you that you didn't give up? Because I would think that some of those days that giving up was on your mind and it was very hard to not give up. Maybe it wasn't, but I'm curious, what is the thing that drove you to not quit?
So the non-romantic answer here is that we just didn't have a plan B. Our ships, they were burned a long time ago.
Yeah.
And because of that, there wasn't like some safety line. Like the biggest safety line we had was, going to our parents a few times to ask for money to cover payroll.
Yeah.
Which is always like super embarrassing, very, very sticky.
Yeah.
I didn't go to my parents. Luckily, my partner Jason and my partner Jim, their parents were a little bit better off than my parents. But I do remember, though, one time my mom did help cover my mortgage at home personally during this.
Wow.
I mean, there's been times when I've gone more than a month without a paycheck.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that. And it's like, that's why I have no tolerance for CEOs being painted in such a negative light by the media.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are taking such massive risk.
Yeah.
It's like losing a job is one thing, but losing a business means, dude, that's
bye-bye
bad.
house.
Bye-bye
Yeah.
house, bye-bye credit.
Yeah.
And you could be out for at least 7 years from a financial perspective,
Yeah.
right? It's like a lot of things that can be going on from that. And so it's one of those things where we didn't have a plan B, and we really just kept trying to learn and live in the solution instead of just focusing entirely on the problem. But I think really the big catalyst, of course, was just the willingness to disrupt and be different. That's what did it, man. And that's what just changed the game as the business. And, we got acquired. We no longer manufacture here in Virginia. River Pools is manufactured in Indiana. This is just River Pools of Virginia today, but today we're a super successful company, and it's really, really wild, man. I didn't know what a distribution was for my first 10 years in business.
Right.
I didn't know what it was. Isn't that crazy? Things can really, really change, but you can't keep doing what you've been doing and expect to get different results.
Yeah. Definition of insanity.
Yeah.
So I asked this one question, and it's a little weird because you may have noticed I didn't ask the typical questions that I would ask because you were already answering them. But one question that I ask that I know people listen for, and I've even got messages when sometimes people have passed or not answered it, and that pisses people off. And
I don't pass ever.
Well, So I always ask people, what's a mistake that you've made, something that you've done that you would be willing to share that mistake with others so that they might be able to learn from it and grow from it and not make that same mistake? Because in my life, that's a lot of what my mentors, the people that I've learned from, the men that I've apprenticed with, the people that have invested in my life, that's what they did. Now, you've shared a lot over this past hour. But if there was one mistake that you would share with our listeners that Marcus has made that you wish someone would have shared with you that you could have learned from it to not make that mistake.
Yeah. Can I share a couple?
Yeah.
Because the fact that anybody would struggle to answer this question is beyond my realm of understanding. I could write a book just on mistakes. You know what I'm saying? So the first one is when we started, we were mainly retail. Okay. And because we were mainly retail, we wanted a nice retail building.
Yeah.
And so at one point we had 2 retail shops and lots of hot tubs in them. And I had written down these 5-year goals, and I wanted to have more retail locations than anybody in Virginia for hot tubs and above ground pools and all this stuff. I realize now, you ever heard of the Oedipus complex?
I haven't.
All right. It's this old Greek thing. But I had an edifice complex. In other words, I was equating retail stores to success. Okay. What I wasn't equating to success was profitability. Like in my mind, I wasn't thinking like profit margins.
Yeah.
I literally was thinking like, here's where I want to be in 5 years. I want to have 5 stores, and I want to be selling more hot tubs than anybody else and more above ground pools than anybody else. This is before we really knew what we were, which is an in-ground pool builder. And those goals almost screwed me.
Yeah.
So a couple mistakes there. Number one.
I had that experience with when I started my business. I was like, well, once I have 30 employees, then, and that was my goal, and it wasn't about profitability. And I learned very quickly, very painfully, how that didn't work.
Those are vanity metrics.
Yeah.
So anything that's vanity based, like, oh, this is going to, like, people will be impressed with this. I've got this building here today. I don't have a retail location. And why? It's because we figured out what we are and we learned what we're not. Happiest day in the life of business isn't when you know what you are, but when you know definitively what you're not. Because then you can say no.
Yeah.
Until you can say no to stuff, you say yes to a lot of things that you shouldn't, and that causes you stress, pain, and frustration later on, right? Especially bad fit customers, which are the bane of your existence. So that was one major mistake that we made, was the edifice complex and focusing on vanity metrics. The biggest mistake that I made, though, overall, and I mentioned it earlier, and it's still a struggle for me to this day, is I'm not an expert when it comes to financials. And because I'm not an expert when it comes to financials and P&L and cash flow and just, all the numbers, because that's a tough thing for me. Like, I was good at basic math until algebra came into play. Yeah. As soon as letters combined with numbers, I was screwed in school. I was out. I was great with 10 times 10, man. I was fast.
Yeah.
But past that point, and so with basic accounting, that's one of those things, man, I just have struggled over the course of 25 years. I'm better today than I was, but I'm not close to where I need to be. I still need a definitive guide. I'm not proud of that. I think that's been, one of my bigger mistakes. One of the ones that I've had in the past that I mentioned before is there were times early on when I allowed my personal opinions to screw up smart business decisions. I've definitely moved past that now, and I'm really rooted in the buyer and where the world's headed, and not where I think it should be. I'm not sitting there saying, China's on TikTok. I'm never going to use TikTok because China. Okay, maybe I'm not a fan of China, but my buyers are on TikTok, and I'm going to roll where my buyers are rolling.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So I'm not going to take this stupid moral high ground when it's going to cost you financial peace in your life, because I signed up to make sure that my wife can go to the grocery store and buy whatever she wants without looking at the prices. That's it, man. That's what I'm here for.
Come on.
And so, that's been a major. And I could, obviously, again, I could go on and on with that, but there's been a lot of mistakes, bro.
Just a couple more questions. One of the things that I'm curious about that I want to hear you answer is, how would you define a brand? What is a brand?
Yeah. It's what people say about you when you're not around.
There we go.
That's
we
it.
agree. I always tell people it's the reputation.
Yeah, it's what people say about, not in front of your face now.
Yeah.
Not what you say about you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you have your ideal weight, but then you step on the scale and look down. You know what I mean? See, the scale don't lie. Your mama will lie to you, your sister will lie to you, but the scale don't lie.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Brands
That's good.
is the scale.
That's good. Marcus, why, and we're coming to an end here, and I really appreciate your time, but why should people buy this book?
Yeah.
Endless Customers.
Well, not everybody should buy the book.
Oh, wow, look at that, eating your own dog food.
Yeah. Well, if you are saying to yourself, we want to become the most known and trusted brand in our market, then yes, you should buy it.
Yeah.
Because there's a system there that will show you exactly how to do that. But if you're like, I'm happy with where I am. I got a couple RFPs a year. I only do B2G, business to government. I'm just not there. I'm like, fine.
Yeah.
No problem. But if you feel like becoming that most known and trusted brand is fundamental to your success now and 10 years from now, well, then I think you're going to be very excited when you get it. You're going to be flooded with ideas.
Yeah.
And then the key is, of course, taking action, which is
Yeah.
always the big delta.
Yeah.
It's the big difference maker.
Well, I know, and they ask, you answer, you comment, and you even, I think, said this earlier on the podcast here, how many people don't do what you say in the book?
Yeah, less than 5%. And they're all like, man, that was a great book. Less than 5% will do it. But, that's why there's high performers, high achievers, and then there's everybody else.
Yeah.
And there's a heck of a lot of people that will order the book, and then they're going to read the first couple chapters, and they're going to put it down. Not because it's not solid. It's like, okay, I think I got it. That's crazy, man. It's wild. But, hey, it's very, very human.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some people that heard this pod today with you, and they're going to come back to us in a few years, Joshua, and they're going to say, it totally changed my life. It happens to me all the time. I'm at an event just a couple days ago. A couple comes up to me and said, Marcus, you made us millionaires. I'm like, oh, man, that's so wonderful. And then dude stops me. It's husband and wife. He puts his arms on his hands on my shoulders. He's like, no, Marcus, I'm serious. You made us a millionaire. I'm like, rock on, bro.
That's awesome.
Rock on.
That's awesome.
That's dope.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in They Ask, You Answer, you made a comment, and you were talking with your team at Impact, and you said, if I remember correctly, you were talking about disrupting your own team in what you guys were doing, and you made this statement. You said, well, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I really think that if you want to be successful in business and you want to do the things, you want to build trust, you want to do those things, and you talked about the golden rule, all that stuff. If we don't have that, then we're actually lying to ourselves.
That's right.
I mean, the reality is, you say you want to build trust with people, and you don't want to like manipulate them, but you want to lead them to what's best for them. If you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do, or you're not willing to do the right thing, then you're really missing what business is about.
Yeah, and it just means that you decided that you're essentially a self-serving organization, and it's about us. It's about our process. It's about our product. And what we've talked about today is ways that you can come across as a very, very different business and brand.
Yeah.
And people will immediately lean in and they say, gosh, I can't believe that they did that. They gave me an estimate real time. They recommended another product real time. No, they talked about their competitors real time. It's like all these things.
Yeah.
You have the choice. I would challenge you to do it, especially if your gut's telling you, inherently, I know he's right. I don't know how we will do it, but I know he's right. If that's what your gut's telling you, listen, go read the book.
Come on, Marcus.
And then get started, take some action, do a few little things, and watch the law of momentum start to work for you and become one of your greatest teammates. And, I felt like I've had that law of momentum on my side for over a decade, and it's extraordinary, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So go through for me and just tell us as we close out here, what are your different businesses?
Yeah.
And tell people where they can find you.
I've got a few.
Yeah.
Total odd one I'll start with.
Yeah.
If you love to fish, I've got an offshore fishing company.
She told me that you love this one.
Yeah.
So
Got an offshore fishing company. On YouTube, it's called Offshore Fishing University. And, Saltwater Fishing University. Don't know the name of my channel. It's got almost 90,000 subscribers, but I don't know the name of my channel. But the brand is called Speechless Sport Fishing. So if you want to go offshore in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, we'll take you, and maybe we can go together and have a blast. So I do that. I have Impact, which helps organizations become the most known and trusted brand in their market through the application of endless customers. They ask, you answer. I have a company called Question First Group. Question First Group teaches leaders and sales teams how to have extraordinary connection with their audience.
Wow.
Essentially by asking better questions, better discovery, better communication. So we train a lot of organizations. I'm very deeply passionate about that. I've got PriceGuide.ai, which helps organizations quickly and easily build estimators that win trust and increase your leads by 300 to 500% on average.
Wow.
So those are the majors. And of course I got River Pools of Virginia here. Still one of the OGs. Sold the manufacturing, but we still have this in Virginia. So man, it's fun being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Love it, man. And I love the trades. And if you're listening to this, if you're in the trades, my son is an electrician.
Yeah.
I was more happy the day he told me he was going to be an electrician than if he had gone to Harvard.
So tell us why, because we need to hear that.
Well, because I think the future is found in the trades.
I agree.
I think we're going to see an explosion of trades in the coming years because the smart place to go, the secure place to go, isn't the computer programmer guy. It is the person that's going into the trades. So I think we're going to see explosive growth there. It's very, very exciting. I also think that the college education model is no longer set up to satisfy what today's business leader and employees, team leaders need in order to be very, very successful. There's way too antiquated a thought. It's much more like a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And you're much smarter. The majority of people are much smarter learning on the job than they are at a school.
I agree.
Mark Twain once said, never let your schooling get in the way of your education. And man, that was prophetic.
Yeah.
And you're going to now see more than any other time a huge shift towards an obsession with education, but not through university.
Yeah.
Through real life application. That's where it's headed. And that's why, when I'm looking at resumes, I don't give a rip about college education. All I care about is how much does this person, how much real life experience does this person have? Are they self-aware, right? Are they obsessed with their personal development? Things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Marcus, thank you for your time, because time is money. And we appreciate your investment here and stepping up to the line and just talking with those of us who are listening and sharing this input. I think it's really huge. I really encourage you to go out to Amazon, buy your book. Where else can they buy it?
Endlesscustomers.com or Amazon. Endlesscustomers.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably go to endlesscustomers.com. That'd be better than Amazon, but whatever. So, all right. Thank you for stepping up to the line. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, bro.